I apologize. I'm having internet problems at my home, so I'm now in my office, which apparently at night has the absolute worst lighting. So I know I'm not the best looking guy in the world, but this is not particularly flattering. So we will get started tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming. This is the Kitsap County Comprehensive Plan draft document summary presentation and workshop. We have staff with us tonight. This is a Zoom meeting, if everyone can keep their mics muted so we don't end up hearing background noise, that would be great. Additionally, the agenda for tonight is we're going to have hopefully an informative presentation. And then after that, we're going to go out into breakout groups. Anybody who has participated in some of these Zoom presentations before is going to be relatively similar. Only this time out, what we're going to be hoping to do in the breakout groups is to answer questions that we can. Again, there's literally about 5,000 pages of documents. So please, there may be times when we aren't able to answer the question on the fly in the breakout groups, but we will make sure that we get the information down and get back to people as possible. So again, the breakout groups will be a combination of people asking questions. We also have some questions we'd like to ask the attendees about the documents, so we can kind of get an idea of some general topics. So what are the documents that were released? We released 4 documents, 2 on December 15th, 2 on December 22nd. So happy holidays. The first 2 documents were the Comprehensive Plan and Environmental Impact Statement. I'm going to use the word EIS or DEIS throughout it. That means Environmental Impact Statement. And then on the 22nd was the Capital Facilities Plan and the Development Regulations. The Capital Facilities Plan, I may use the word CFP. I'm going to try not to, but again, CFP means Capital Facilities Plan. So what are each of these documents other than long? The first is the plan. This is the document that sets aspirational standards for Kitsap County moving through 2044. It establishes goals and policies that are intended to be balanced. So I'm going to go through a number of the elements of the comprehensive plan. You're going to see that there is everything ranging from land use to economic development to climate change to transportation. All of these have goals and policies. All of these goals and policies need to be balanced over time. So when you read one, don't expect that necessarily it is the top priority. It is a priority that needs to be balanced with other priorities from the other chapters. Additionally, we've included a series of strategies. That is a layer below goals and policies. Strategies are usually some very discrete actions that the county is going to take to achieve the policies. So while the goals and policies can be a little more lofty, the strategies are usually more specific. We have countywide chapters and we have specific sub-area plans. We're going to spend most of our time talking about the countywide chapters this evening. So the second is the draft environmental impact statement. What this is intended to do is it's intended to assess impacts of proposed alternatives and propose potential mitigation. So what really we're looking for here is not all the impacts. What we are looking for is new impacts, ones that are significantly adverse, and this is being done on a countywide planning level analysis. So when you're looking at this document, make sure that you look at it that it is countywide. We are operating under, oh great, the lights have gone out. We are operating at, again, that planning level. Just 1 second, I'm going to turn the lights back on here so I can actually see something. Sorry about that. So if people are looking for some detailed environmental analysis about a specific property or a specific set of properties, that's not what the environmental impact statement does. Again, it is trying to look at a countywide planning level analysis. It is also a very long document and a very technical document for people who would like to go to the summaries of what it does to earth, noise, transportation, water. Section 1.5 of the environmental impact statement is the place to go, as it provides summaries of both the impacts by alternative, but also provides some potential mitigation. Those are potentials, not necessarily required, but they are options for the county to pursue in our plans moving forward. Third document is a capital facilities plan. That details the infrastructure necessary to accommodate growth. Largely that is related to our urban growth areas, making sure that we have enough pipes, pavement, and services to be able to handle the number of people that are expected to come to Kitsap County to live, work, and play. The capital facilities plan comes in two versions, the 6-year and 20-year. The 6-year plan actually has to have money attached to it. Any projects that we're planning on doing in the first 6 years, we have to be able to detail where that money's coming from and generally how much that's going to cost. The 20-year is more general. Once you start trying to plan out beyond 6 years, things get very, they change very fast. Those numbers are a lot more vague. The projects are more vague, but they are intended to get their arms around what kind of impacts might be coming. Transportation is a good example of the 20-year projected needs. We have some lane deficiencies. Some will be handled in the first 6 years. Others will be handled over the course of 20 years as development occurs. Then the last is, how is development occurring? That's the development regulations. That's a series of titles of county code. What are the requirements that are necessary for development to meet our goals and policies? If we say we're going to protect our environment in this way, the development regulations should read in that manner. If we say we're providing flexibility in development, it's those development regulations about uses, site design, heights, and other features. And I'll talk a little more about that later. However, I do want to highlight that Kitsap County has a lot of historic development patterns. Not all of those development patterns are currently allowed by the Growth Management Act. So some of the new development and some of the new development regulations are going to be looking at patterns that are denser and more intense than we saw in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. So what are some of the big ticket topics that the comprehensive plan is having to address? Obviously, there is the obvious one, which we need to meet our population and employment growth targets through 2044. Additionally, and in many ways conflicting, we also have to accommodate commerce's directed housing needs. We have certain types of housing that we don't have in the county that we need to provide more of to improve affordability. We need to begin to address the state's climate change goals. A bill was passed last year that required jurisdictions such as ourselves to come into compliance with climate change goals by 2029. This plan is intending to establish a foundation. And then, not directly related to directly related to the comprehensive plan, but not part of this presentation, we are at the same time updating our critical areas ordinance. A number of the people in the audience are participating in that effort as well. That critical areas ordinance needs to be updated based upon best available science, which indicates that we are taking the most up-to-date information and we're ensuring that our environmental regulations match. The downside to these is they do tend to conflict over time. The more protection of critical areas in urban areas, the less land that might be available to develop. If there's less land to develop, where are those people going to live or work? Do we need to make the urban growth areas larger? None of these are prioritized. They all have to be balanced, just like all the goals of growth management. So staff is working to establish that balance. These documents don't necessarily meet that balance concept. What it is, these are all intended to be a menu for people to take a look at. None of the things you're going to see tonight are recommendations of staff, recommendations of the board, or even necessarily recommendations of any member of the public. But we do want to take a look at different potential realities so that the public can weigh in and the board can decide on exactly how to mix and match components of these plans. So just generally, what are the three alternatives? People have seen this presentation before, have heard this a million times. First of which is a no action alternative. What if we do nothing? What if we just stay with our code the way it is today, stay with our comp plan the way it is today? Well, downside is we don't meet our housing targets, we don't meet our population targets, and we don't meet our employment targets. So thus we haven't really accomplished what we set out to do. But this does establish the baseline for our environmental review. This is where we are today. This plan was developed through 2036. Our new plan has to be developed through 2044, so accommodating an additional 8 years of growth. The second is a more focused growth or urban center focus. That really is looking to put as much population and employment in our urban centers. Silverdale, obviously our cities, Kingston, and the central Kitsap urban growth area are taking a significant amount of the density. So we're looking at more multifamily, we're looking at more single family attached housing, and we really are looking at expanding housing diversity as we are very single family detached housing focused. Alternative 2 works great. It's a lot better for the environment because we're putting more people in a smaller area. And we're able to meet our Commerce's housing targets, but we exceed our countywide planning policy population targets. I'll go into a little more about that later. And then the third alternative is dispersed growth. That basically looks at, okay, we aren't looking to bend the trend. We're looking to develop as we have historically with largely single family. Urban areas need to be expanded to accommodate that growth a lot more than an alternative 2. Also, there's more rural development that is allowed. There are a number of rural reclassification requests that are included only in alternative 3. One of those is the Rainier Radiant proposal. But also this alternative includes a number of environmental regulations, such as the increase in buffers for non-fish streams. That was increased by an additional 50 feet. Additionally, we have tree retention requirements. So regardless whether you're inside or outside of a critical area, you would have to retain a certain number of the trees on your property. Obviously, both of those mean that less land is going to be available for development, which could in turn mean that more land is needed in our urban areas to accommodate both our housing and our population. So staff went through and we reviewed the Growth Management Act changes since our last plan in 2016, Vision 2050, which is the Puget Sound Regional Council's regional plan for their changed goals and policies. And then we have our countywide planning policies, which are the ones that apply to just Kitsap County, the cities, tribes, and Kitsap County work to try to collaborate on our planning. They have goals and policies. All of this, the comprehensive plan needs to accommodate all of these all the way down in our current design. So we went through and we looked at where are the gaps, where have these documents changed, and where does our comprehensive plan not meet them anymore? A lot of you have been participating in this since 2022. We've been meeting with the general public. We've been taking in comment, and we tried to work much of that comment into the current draft. Some of the comment conflicted, so there is some, what I will say, interpretation of some of the comment by staff. And then, of course, ultimately in April, we had to have board direction on the alternatives that we are reviewing for the comprehensive plan. So those 3 alternatives I described before come with a series of land use maps. Those were all approved by the Board of County Commissioners for review in these documents. So I'm going to kind of skip to some of the planning is a lot of math. That's one thing that most people don't understand is that really there's a lot of spreadsheets involved in planning nowadays. It seems a little odd when you're trying to create communities that you're spending this much time trying to look at numbers like this. But what you're seeing here is these are our countywide planning policy population targets. These are the targets that we are intending to meet. You'll see here between 2020 and 2024, 44, Bremerton is taking the most growth. Port Orchard is taking the second most, Silverdale third. Kingston is taking roughly about 3,200 people, which is more than its current population. So Kingston, due to its ferry infrastructure, is looking to take a lot of additional population, more than it has in the past. And then you have a very low rural allocation. Again, rural areas are intended to be protected from growth, and we have countywide planning policies that take that significantly further than we have in the past. Again, trying to focus our growth in urban areas. So as I indicated, there's math. You guys don't have to read through all this. You can look at the last 3 columns are the most important ones. Basically, this is a supply and demand. You have how many people are coming to your community. That's your demand. Then you have to figure out how much space do you have in your existing urban growth areas. That would be your land capacity alternative 1 column. So how many do you have to accommodate those people? So when you can, then you compare those to the individual alternatives, and you get the last 3 columns. The last 3 columns are the comparison of our adjusted growth 2022 to 2044. We adjusted to 2022 to make sure that we were having an apples to apples comparison with our land capacity data. And from there, you'll note that alternative 1 is substantially short. We're about 2,700 people short. That was largely because The previous plan was established for 2036. We're now doing 2044. There's a number of other nuance changes along with it. Remember when I mentioned that the alternative 2 met our housing targets, but does not meet our population targets? We greatly exceed our population targets, and I'll talk a little more about why that is in alternative 2. And then alternative 3, where we again had larger urban growth areas, we are closer to our population number. We're still about 600 people over, but when you're talking about trying to find homes for about 28,000 people, 600 people is getting pretty close to the pin. We don't want to be knocking on every door and saying, hey, how many people can you fit in there, so we can get exactly to a 0 number. So the red numbers indicate that we're over target. So I was talking about the housing. Kitsap County is very single family detached housing dependent. Most of our housing is that and is becoming grossly unaffordable. So what Commerce through the legislature did indicated that we needed to increase the diversity of housing types. And we need to do that in concert with how much people can afford to pay for housing. And that's done by comparing it to annual median income. Roughly for a family of 4 in Kitsap County, the annual median income is about $107,000. So as you start looking at these percentages, you see 0 to 30%, 30 to 50%, 50 to 80, 80 to 100, and so on. That is the percentage of annual median income and the number of units that are necessary for people to be able to live in them. So in general, when you're looking at between 0 and about 50%, you're talking about multifamily only in Kitsap County. Between 50 and 80, it's kind of a mix of multifamily and single family attached housing. Once you get over 80%, you're now into largely single family detached housing. And Commerce provided these numbers, not just for Kitsap, but for all of the cities. These are not population, these are housing units. So historically, we have just worked on making sure that we get enough people into our urban growth area boundaries. How and what kind of housing they lived in was not quite as focused on. Now we have to focus, and most importantly, we need to focus on these three columns I'm showing here in red. These are, again, a lot of it is public housing, but also a lot of it is multifamily, and most of it is multifamily housing. So you're looking here at us needing somewhere in the neighborhood of around 7,000 units when you start calculating in some of the 50 and 80%. We need multifamily housing, either condos to own or apartments to rent to meet these numbers. Kitsap County does not have that many. We have, I will show you in a moment, significantly fewer than Commerce is telling us we need. And that doesn't even address the 50 to 80% AMI number, that 1,996. Some of that also has to be multifamily. And of course, in Kitsap County, a vast majority of all our multifamily units have to be in multifamily or commercial zones. So we need to make sure we have enough capacity in those zones to handle those housing targets. So roughly what you're looking at here is, again, an assessment of those housing targets. So what you're going to see is everything in the rows above are pretty much multifamily. The ones in the rows below are single family. So, and the one what you'll be looking at there, and I think what is the third column, that is an assessment of the numbers provided to us by the Department of Commerce. So as we're looking at the pretty much 0 to 50%, we need about 6,300 units. That doesn't, again, include the 51 to 80%, and that's going to have, we're going to have to figure out how to split that up as well. So 6,358 units is a conservative estimate. It's closer to 7,000 probably. When you're looking at here, you're looking at how many multifamily units do we have capacity for if we do nothing? We have less than 2,000. That is not nearly enough. So we need to provide an additional 5,000 units to be able to accommodate our Commerce housing needs. And these aren't necessarily targets. I think we can all understand that our young and our old and the people who are not necessarily making a significant amount of money are struggling to find housing in Kitsap County. So these numbers, while they look high, and they look very high, most of our analyses for the last 10 years have shown, yes, we are deficient in multifamily housing and single family attached. The problem being is when you have urban growth areas that are a particular size, and then you go and you drastically upzone your multifamily and your commercial zones to meet the number of housing units you need, you're bringing a lot more people into your existing UGAs than you ever had before. And that is where you get those population overages. Again, meeting our housing need, but exceeding our population number. That will have to be something that's considered as we're working on what our preferred alternative. Where are we going to be on this pendulum? Because you can't really do both at the same time. And then also, this is the employment target. We have to meet our jobs analysis. What you're seeing here is you are largely seeing the fact that alternative 3 has too many jobs in it. That's where that's where most of the reclassification requests were located. We're under the number of jobs in alternative 2, and of course the do nothing alternative there in the third row to the right shows we're about 7,000 under if we do nothing. So obviously doing nothing really was not an option, but these other two show that we have kind of created a menu for people to be able, for the public to be able to mix and match. I like this, I don't like that. The board then will be able to take this and be able to create an alternative, a preferred alternative based on that. So I'm going to kind of rush through some of the land use, some of the chapters. Again, now we're moving back into the comprehensive plan. This is the narrative. This is the aspirational actions. This is what needs to be balanced. Basically, our land use chapter is our more technical chapter. It basically talks about how you do your land capacity analysis, how you determine the number of people and jobs that you need in your community. But then it also talks about your zoning of your urban areas. The map you see here is the central Kitsap urban growth area. That's between Rydell Road and Barker Creek. It basically talks about your urban zoning to, again, maximize urban development. It talks about your rural zoning and how you're going to protect rural character. It provides for small agricultural uses. It also is intended to protect mineral and timber resources. We don't have a lot of timber and we have minerals scattered throughout the county. But also we really want to talk about a built environment in this chapter that provides for healthy living. We want to ensure that there's parks, that it's walkable. All of these things are aspirations of the land use, of the county comprehensive plan that you see drafted. Economic development, we need to make sure that people are able to work here in Kitsap County. Obviously, we have a lot of folks who work in the Seattle area. That is people either driving and getting on a ferry or driving around to work in the Seattle area. That is not necessarily good for the environment. It's not good for greenhouse gas emissions. We'd like to foster more employment here in Kitsap County, especially leveraging the Navy's presence. The Navy helps our maritime community. It helps our high-tech community. We also want to ensure that we are helping women and minority-owned small businesses to start up and expand in our communities. We want to explore emerging industries and technologies. A lot of that is all located down in the, I'm sorry, they changed the name and I'm still grappling with it. Puget Sound Industrial Center, Bremerton, which is located down by the airport. That is the vast majority of our industrial land where a lot of places like safe boats are located. We need to ensure that we have jobs for our community to go with our population, so not everybody is commuting, even if it is by bus. We have the housing chapter. I kind of talked about this already. We're short single family attached and we're short multifamily housing. We do not have housing diversity, and more people are finding themselves having to live out of county while working in the county, and we are losing our human component. There's the natural environment, there's the built environment, then there's the human environment. The people who have lived here our entire lives, who either A, aren't able to live here as they age, or aren't able to live here because of their income. We're losing our communities, not just protecting our environment and our built environment. So I've talked a lot about that. We really want to ensure infill development in our urban growth areas. To do that, we are proposing an increase in density in our single family zones. That increase in density could allow for more attached housing. When I say attached housing, I apologize. I should have said exactly what do I mean by that. I mean townhomes, I mean row housing, I mean things larger than duplex. Those are units that, again, are more affordable and you're able to fit more of them into a smaller space. Multifamily is vertical construction. So now you're talking about units on top of one another, single family attached, units next to one. I apologize for not being clearer on that while using the term over and over and over again. So we also need to, as our area starts to redevelop and more housing is put into certain areas like Silverdale, we need to make sure we're mitigating displacement risk, that people in the BIPOC community are not being inappropriately impacted by redevelopment, by people who are low income are not being grossly impacted by redevelopment, that they have places to go if the area that used to be affordable redevelops into something else. The environment and climate change chapters, again, this is protecting our critical areas, protecting our shorelines, and protecting our natural systems. This is the push and pull with the housing and land use chapters in many cases. We're looking to get people and homes into a particular area. We want to maximize the number of people, but we have so many streams and so many wetlands and so many shorelines. Kitsap County has 227 miles of shorelines, and our urban growth areas are nearly entirely encased by them. We need to be able to protect those things while also being able to provide the housing. We also need to ensure that we're providing green space inside our urban growth area boundaries, making sure we have urban tree canopy. And we need to treat natural resources as an asset. And what do I mean by that? I don't mean an economic asset. What I do mean is that we spend so much time talking about land is I could build this many homes on it, and that would be worth blank. Or I can build a shopping center on it, and it's worth blank. But what is it worth if we don't do those things? What does it mean to the overall environment if it is left undeveloped? What is the benefits of carbon sequestration? What is the benefits of water recharge? What is all that? We're working very closely on being able to kind of calculate that so that when we have conversations about the economic value of development, we also have numbers to go along. What is the economic value of not developing and protecting components of our urban growth area? Climate change is our new chapter. This is the one that we will be required to become into full compliance with in 2029. We are just establishing a strong foundation for that in this document. We are looking to strongly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Again, Alternative 2 does a lot of that by putting as many people into a small space as possible. We also are looking to adopt greenhouse gas emission reduction targets that Puget Sound Regional Council put together. That is roughly looking to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% below 1990 levels by the year 2050. That is a big elephant, but it's one that needs to be eaten one bite at a time, and we're looking to start in 2024. And then we also need to talk about climate resilience. Again, 227 miles of shoreline. Sea level rise is going to be a thing for us. We have floodplains. King tides are a thing that is becoming more and more impactful to our shorelines and more impactful to the lower reaches of our streams. We need to ensure that we are preparing our infrastructure, roads, sewer plants, to be protected from those impacts. We don't want a sewer plant or a sewer pump station to be overcome by a king tide and thus put a significant amount of effluent into the water. We need to be thinking more about that and how our capital facilities can be created to address that. Parks, I've already talked about green space in our urban growth areas. We have the Illahee Forest. We have a Clear Creek Trail. We have a lot of regional parks in our rural areas. We need to make sure that we're providing opportunities for active and passive recreation. What I mean by active is fields and facilities. Passive recreation is usually trails and open space. So we need to ensure that we are providing both of those with our park system. And we have so much parkland that we should be able to meet those needs around the county. We need to make sure that we're using green infrastructure where appropriate. Tree canopy in our urban growth area, tree canopy in our county parks is also important. Even when we're having active recreation, we should be maintaining trees and other green space beyond just grass or artificial turf. And then lastly, we need to make sure that we can fund our park system. Kitsap County has doubled its parks inventory in the last 10 years. We've taken land that will forever be available to the Kitsap County residents for use. But we need to be able to maintain it. Our stewards are incredible volunteers, and they do an incredible job. But we now have so much of it, and these areas need so much maintenance. We need to ensure that we have a proper amount of money to maintain our parks. Transportation, I'm going to cut this down to pretty much two things. We need more transit and we need more multimodal opportunities. That's biking, that's walkability. We need people not to have to get in their car to do absolutely anything in Kitsap County. We have so much land that that's the case. Silverdale currently is our commercial center. Almost everybody has to drive to get there. We need to grossly expand our transportation network. And alternative two is very, very heavily dependent on transit, increasing dramatically, not just between Poulsbo and Silverdale or Silverdale and Bremerton. It is around Silverdale. People can get from the school campus to the hospital multiple times during the day. That's the type of thing that multifamily housing needs. That is what a true walkable community needs. We also need to have more bike lanes and more sidewalks. I'll talk more about Silverdale here in a moment. But largely what we need to make sure is with all these people coming that we are meeting our level of service standards when it comes to transportation. That is an A through F rating system. And we need to make sure that all of our roadways are meeting our designated letter. That is, let me get this wrong. That is level of service C in the rural area and D in the urban area. Did I get that right, Jim? Nod if I got it right. Okay, good. And if we don't meet those, which you're going to note in the environmental impact statement, then on many roadways we don't. We need to plan projects that meet those. And there's going to be a lot of widening of our roadways, as you're going to see in that environmental impact statement. Capital facilities is basically the same thing, only with types and facilities. Schools, fire stations. How are those going to be sized properly for our growth? And how are they going to be funded? And then we have sub-area plans. Certain parts of our community have special goals and policies, ones that apply just to their areas. Keyport, Illahee, and Gorst are three areas with these sub-area plans where no changes are currently proposed from the 2016 plan. Manchester and Suquamish are two rural sub-areas. The only changes proposed largely for those is removing a lot aggregation requirement. I could go into that, but that would take me about 10 to 15 minutes to explain. It matters a lot to the folks in that community, and they are paying a very close attention. We're going to be doing additional public outreach to refine the community's goals for all of these plans between now and the end of the year. But two areas that are dramatically changing are Kingston and Silverdale. They both have sub-area plans as well, and they are the ones that are going to see the most significant revisions to meet growth projections and housing needs. So let's start with Kingston. Kingston has an established countywide center in the draft documents. That is the dark blue, I don't know what, the dark line around some of the colors here on this map. That is the area that we are looking to concentrate growth, increase multifamily development opportunities, increase density, also increase potential building heights up to 55 feet. When we're talking about this, we're largely talking about the red area that's zoned commercial. The area that's zoned Pepto-Bismol is Urban Village Center. It also is intended to be multifamily. It's intended to be mixed use, but again, it is supposed to be a little more demure. It is supposed to maintain the Kingston community character a lot more than the other areas. The heights are lower. The expectation of additional multifamily is lower. It's also where both the port and the Kingston Community Advisory Committee are working so hard to ensure that the development regulations are friendly for these types of development. So the redevelopment can occur, but Kingston can still maintain its quality of life. And we really appreciate, again, the Kingston Community Advisory Committee and the port, who have been working very hard and did a lot of work on the goals and policies that you see in the draft plan, though some of those went through the filter of staff as there were some disagreements about how things should be in some of the documents. And then I'm going to move on to Silverdale. Silverdale is, again, the area that we're focusing the most growth. It is our regional center. It is supposed to be the second most dense area compared to Bremerton per our regional and countywide plans. This is the area where we are dramatically increasing potentials for development, both multifamily housing, commercial, and medical. We established a clear boundary around this regional center so that we're ensuring that this is the area that we're looking to focus our efforts when it comes to regulatory reform and certain incentives. We are seeing multifamily in a lot of other areas of the county. We're not seeing it in the downtown. And what do you see? What do you see most in this picture? You see a lot of paved area, that was made for the retail boom that no longer is with us. There's a lot of land in here that can be redeveloped. When we talk about redevelopment, we're not necessarily talking about businesses no longer being there. We're now talking about potentially repurposing a lot of that concrete jungle, a lot of that parking area that was barely used during the retail boom and now not used at all. How can we potentially put other facilities on there? And again, what we're looking at there is we're increasing maximum densities, we're reducing parking requirements, we're expanding exemptions for SEPA to be able to allow people to put in affordable housing and multifamily housing faster. We're looking at multifamily tax exemptions, which again provide tax incentives for people to build multifamily housing. And then we're also requiring frontage improvements. You may ask, why are we doing all of this? Because what we have in Silverdale is we have a lot of businesses that are making money today. But if we as a community want to see Silverdale be a 24/7 community, we really need to create an environment, create incentives, create regulations that make it easier for the property owners, who are the ones who make the decision. Developers, community, we can want all we want. But if the landowners are not willing to make these choices, they won't. We need to make sure that the climate is good for them to be able to think bigger, think beyond the next year, the next two of rents. Think what this could be 10 years from now if this wasn't just a single Starbucks slash other strip mall. Let's say it was a mixed use on the bottom. You still have your commercial and you have multifamily up above. What could that be? And most property owners are looking at things from a financial perspective. So while planning usually tries to think about community, thinks about environment, we have to think about the finances, because ultimately it's the landowner who has to make the decision to change the land use. We need to make our communities more walkable. Silverdale has a lot of what we call super blocks. That is a planning term, basically meaning it's too far in between intersections for people to really be able to walk. The mall is a good example, as is the Mickleberry, Best Buy, Costco, Lowe's area. We need to find great ways to provide more pedestrian and bicycle opportunities, as well as transit opportunities, to break these blocks up. This can be done through redevelopment over time, but really is going to require a lot of concentrated planning between the landowners, the developers, and the community as how this area can change over time. As you know, a lot of these conceptual lines are located on existing private property that have existing uses on them. It has to be a collaborative effort, true public-private partnership. The public has to benefit, and the private sector needs to benefit. It's the only way that works, and the only way it's going to work in Silverdale, especially with the fact that most of the businesses there are doing quite well. You're going to note in the environmental impact statement that transit is the only way that we are going to be able to see a 24/7 Silverdale, one that has people living there all day long, people who aren't driving in and out. We're going to need transit. And hey, transit. We need people to not have to plan their lives around the bus. Hey, the bus comes twice a day. I guess I have to have my doctor's appointment around then, or I have to get on the bus and then hang out in the neighborhood until my appointment comes up, because it only comes a couple times a day. We need bus service that is going to be guaranteed to come to a particular stop in particular intervals. People need to be able to walk down to a bus stop and not necessarily have to look at a bus schedule. They know that in 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, there's going to be a bus there that's going to get you from one part of Silverdale to another part of Silverdale. We must make that type of transit a priority. We spend a lot of time talking about how to get between communities. We need to talk about how to get within communities. And then now we're moving on to the code amendments. That's the development regulation section. I've talked about some of these already. To ensure that we are moving forward with, again, a more dense environment in alternative two, the drafts show increased densities for multifamily and commercial zones, increased densities for single family attached housing. That is important for people who live in existing single family developments and may have a vacant lot that someone wanted a bigger yard and was never developed. These changes to regulations could mean that instead of that lot being a single family residence, it could be a triplex, it could be a fourplex. I say that because I don't want anyone to feel like that's being hidden in all our conversation about multifamily. There are single family attached housing opportunities in existing single family zones, and I want to make sure everybody's cognizant of it. Or increased housing, height allowances, removing setbacks for some multifamily and single family attached, again, allowing buildings to be closer to one another, but they still must meet fire code. And then again, I already talked about the SEPA thresholds. I already talked about the multifamily tax exemption, which again gives a property owner, if you're going to build a certain type of multifamily housing, the opportunity to forego property taxes for between 8 and 12 years. 8 years for multifamily, 12 years for affordable housing. We're looking at that in Silverdale and Kingston. We're also looking at tree replacement and tree retention requirements. So again, we're going to have to protect our critical areas. Our critical area buffers through the critical areas ordinance may be getting bigger depending on best available science, but should there still be additional trees left behind and required to be maintained? Tree replacement does that by indicating that, okay, development, come in, build your plan, but you have to replace X number of trees afterwards. And then you have tree retention. That's the opposite. You basically, the developer says, okay, these number of trees are staying behind. They're not in a critical area buffer. They would normally be developable, but those number of trees are going to stay behind and they are going to be maintained over time. And then we're going to develop around the outside of it. The downside for tree retention is when you develop around the outside of it, sometimes the costs get higher and the housing gets more expensive. But you also are maintaining mature trees. So as you're kind of looking through the draft alternatives, this is just kind of again, 1.5 of the EIS really talks about the impacts. Not surprisingly, from everything I've described. Anyone want to guess what the EIS says when you put a whole bunch of people in a smaller area? It's better for the environment. People are driving less. People are living and working and playing all in the same area. Greenhouse gas emissions are going down. Less land is being converted into development and less is being converted into urban development. But also you can say, all right, you're going to put that many people in there, very likely transportation is going to be an issue. And like I said before, transit is required for us to be able to do alternative two. We need to have those services in Kingston, the Central Kitsap Urban Growth Area, and Silverdale, if we're truly going to see these 24/7 communities. And then dispersed growth. Obviously, we have more space. More land is being utilized for development. So while the impervious surface may stay somewhat similar, you are doing it over a wider area and more environment is being impacted. Also, because you are still dependent mainly on single passenger vehicles, impacted lane miles is the highest. But what you are going to find is that a lot of these numbers are all going to be very similar. So anybody who was looking at the environmental impact statement, hoping it was going to be a silver bullet on a particular topic, like this is going to tell me that alternative two is obviously better than alternative three, or alternative three is obviously better than alternative two. It isn't that way. It is much more nuanced. It is much more, the two are very similar in overall impact. It's just where those impacts are occurring. So I just wanted to kind of lay that out there for the people who are kind of wading through the 700-page environmental impact statement. So where do we go from here? Oh, I'm so close. I'm so close to being on time. What we have here is we have an updated schedule. I want to be clear on two things. The comment period. We've been taking comment this entire time. Comment period is going to continue to run, but comments on the draft environmental impact statement are due by the end of this month. That's the SEPA review period. Comments on all the other documents, particularly when we're talking about large policy initiatives or the maps, Those really, I say due, but they really should be in by April 8th. The board is going to have to make decisions in April about a preferred alternative, which is going to be, what does the map look like? What areas are in the UGA? What areas are out of the UGA? What places in the rural areas change? Which ones don't? And then are we going to do tree replacement? Are we going to do tree retention? What are we going to do with those? Those types of large decisions are going to have to be made in April, and comment is going to be very important during this period of time. It's important the whole time, but it's particularly important through April. And then further public process will occur through December. So while the board is going to make these large policy-related decisions, there's going to be a lot of wordsmithing. We're going to be indicating that, okay, this policy to really meet that goal could be written in a different way. We're going to have additional public outreach to, again, refine the goals and policies, refine the county code to ensure that it is meeting the goals and policies. So we're going to be doing that. Again, what you see here is pretty much to the end of the year. The preferred alternative is going to be selected in April. So again, while it's very important to always participate in the comprehensive plan, that really is the document that will affect how development occurs in your neighborhood. It is really this window through April that it's really important to be as engaged as you can. And I know I'm getting paid to do this, and I'm asking you to volunteer your time. I really appreciate all the work that the community does in reviewing the documents and participating in these processes. So what are the future meetings coming up? And I think this is the last slide, mercifully. Future meetings coming up. We have, of course, the meeting tonight. We're going to have an in-person open house workshop at the Kitsap County Administration Building in the board's chambers. That's going to be more open house than workshop, very likely. There'll probably be a little presentation, not like this, but we are going to have a lot more opportunity for you to ask individual questions of staff on a one-on-one, face-to-face basis. We're going to have a lot of posters up. We're going to have the maps up. We're going to have opportunities to comment both in writing, poster boards, a standard open house. So again, for people who like the old school version, January 18th is going to be a great opportunity for you. Then in February, after we've taken some of the public comment, the EIS scoping period is closed. We're going to have another virtual workshop where we're going to talk about, here's some of the things that we've been hearing from public comment so far. And then we're going to have an in-person version of that, again, in Port Orchard. Then, like I indicated, the public comment is going to run, and then there's going to be public hearings. Those are truly old school. Those are where you get the opportunity to go and speak directly to the Planning Commission on March 5th, also in Port Orchard, and April 8th, where you will have an opportunity to testify before the Board of County Commissioners. That's where you're talking directly to your elected representatives or the Planning Commission who are appointed by your elected representatives. For people who want to testify at these, you don't have to be there in person. You do have the opportunity to testify via Zoom. These are hybrid meetings. We want to make sure we're getting as much testimony as possible. So both March 5th and 8th are hybrid, February 22nd in person, 13th only through Zoom, and then of course the one next week is in person only. So I want to thank you very much. Again, how do you comment on these things? I would really focus on the compplan@kitsap.gov email address, but also if you go to our webpage, you're going to find individual comment forms. Say you want to comment on one specific thing. We have various web portals that have drop-down menus that have the opportunity for you to select what you're really testifying on, and you can write in your comments. You can write in as many comments as you like, but if you are more freeform, or you'd like to put all your comments in one chunk, the email address is an excellent way to do that. And also for all the information, all the documents, the 5,000 pages, and all the updates that we're going to be doing between now and April, please visit the kcowa.us/compplan or scan that QR code down in the lower left-hand corner. So with that, I'm going to stop. We're now going to go into breakout groups. I do want to do a little preface on the breakout groups. These are not geographically centered. They are not topic centered. They are a potpourri. So people are able to ask questions, and staff will be asking questions that are going to cover a number of different topics. So we're doing this because we don't want, in case we have a whole bunch of people who only care about, say, Kingston, that one group has 80 people. I guess it can't be 80, it's only 48 total. 40 people and the other ones have 8. So we're going to be breaking everybody out randomly. Some people are going to get stuck with me as moderator. Some of the other people are going to be lucky and they're going to get some of the other staff who are with us tonight. So with that, Alex, do you want to do your magic?